UKMotorTalk.
Hello, we are back and broken. We've been talking about our personal MOT tests and things falling off. It turns out that Graham has developed a severe leak from his power steering fluid. Work out what it is. I have some sort of issue with my turbo shaft. And Jim, how are you?
I'm all right, to be fair. I'm just tired, although I think I've decided I'm as well as I'm ever going to be. So people say, oh, that's good. And I say, well, no, I think it means it's all downhill from here, really. But hey, it's cold, it's damp, it's miserable. I'm bored of winter already. I'm not even sure it is winter yet, but it felt very much like winter today.
It's 2 degrees at Cobham. It's cold today.
I had the ice alert light come up on the Volvo, and that comes up at 2 degrees.
I was going to say, I think is that a measure of the ruggedness of the car? If the Volvo gets sort of slightly warning you at 2 degrees, I think most modern cars get a bit hoppy at 7 degrees, don't they? Or 5 degrees. They certainly get a bit, oh no, it's cold
Quite
outside,
possible.
or is it? The Volvo's made of sturdier stuff, so it's probably okay, isn't it?
Well, I'm very glad I had the front tyres replaced last week anyway. If we're going to start getting some snow.
However, is this weather not great for car and induction and turbo and all those kind of things? You go out of a drive and it's just thinking, yeah, everything feels alive and there's lots of power and I like it. The Mini always seems to really enjoy that cold, dense air.
That's true, actually, yeah. More power, more air, more fuel, more power, colder temperatures, so slightly less grip. So yeah, more power, less grip. That's always more fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the roads were a bit greasy today, so there was definitely less grip. I was behind a 4 Series convertible. I think they're still a 4 Series with the convertible type, aren't they? I don't know. Anyway, going off the...
It's probably a 32 because you times it by something or other, don't you? Or add 5 or so. I don't know. Who knows?
I have lost track of what BMW are doing and their giant nostrils. But nevertheless, it was ahead of me on the roundabout, went in a bit keen, and then the whole back end started twitching around all over the show, and then the traction control caught it. The person in front did a poo, and they just pulled straight over to the left. I've never seen someone move so fast into the left-hand lane. But definitely that bit colder and greasier, and presumably caught him unawares.
Yep, it's going to do that to a lot of people over the next few weeks.
On that note, I think we're probably better plan to do some things indoors. And earlier on, the two of you said, how have I not seen the Brawn F1 thing yet? So go on, tell me about it, because I haven't seen it.
Yes, I mean, for those that haven't seen it, I think it came out some months ago, a year ago, a while ago.
It's on Disney,
anyway,
though, wasn't it?
It came out ages ago on Disney, so it's maybe not available to everyone, because it's one of Disney, of course, being one of a myriad of subscription services, but it's now out on BBC Two, so presumably there's a much larger percentage of the population have elected to pay their entirely optional BBC licence fee. Oh, no, wait. No, that's probably a subject for another podcast. But yes, it's now out on BBC Two, so you can watch it, and I highly recommend you do. If you're completely new to Formula One, it's well worth a watch. If you're a die-hard Formula One fan, it's well worth a watch. I think it seems to strike that lovely balance between it doesn't matter if you're new to Formula One, it gets you gripped, but also if you love and have been around Formula One for ages, it doesn't... I don't know, it sort of doesn't do things just for the sake of the story, so it manages to avoid the drive to survive, careful editing and cutting things together. Yeah. So very, very slick production, I thought.
It does mention Drive to Survive quite a number of times, in fact, but I think it was more entertaining than that is. And Keanu Reeves, love him or hate him.
Love him. How can you not love Keanu Reeves?
It's only you that doesn't, I think, Graham, isn't it?
Maybe so.
What have you done? He's like a darling of the people.
By all accounts, he's one of the nicest, most down-to-earth human beings
I have
on
no
the
doubt
planet.
of that.
What have you done to wind him up? You haven't killed his dog.
I have no grief against him. Some of the questions he asked are daft, perhaps because they're posed to him, but some of the questions are a fan's question and draw a fan's response, and in that respect, it was very entertaining, and it's quite revealing. So people are, I mean, the only person on Drive to Survive that was really frank was Gunther Steiner, and that was only if there was a 4-letter or a string of 4-letter words involved. You didn't get to see that much behind the scenes with with the Brawn, I think you got an understanding of just how near that team, when it was Honda, was to a complete collapse when they pulled the plug. Essentially, the fact that Ross Brawn paid a quid for the team because they produced the quid as evidence, quid pro quo, so to speak. But they then came back with, I think he said 11 million in engines and engine parts and gearbox parts to keep the team afloat for the first season. So Honda, having pulled out, did so with a lot of goodwill involved, I think, a lot of personal goodwill involved.
I'll set it to record so I can sit down and watch the whole thing again. I only caught the very end of one episode the other night, and it was Christian Horner getting salty, which is always entertaining to see.
Yeah.
It's also remarkable if you watch it now, and when you're watching the 2009 footage of Christian Horner, just how much work he's had done. It's quite a lot. He's had quite a lot of work done. It's surprising
allegedly
to see. No, not allegedly. No allegedly about it. He's definitely had at the very least his teeth done, and he's looking good for his years. But then, of course, he's worth a couple of bob, so he can look after himself, can't he? But the other person I was watching, Luca de Montezemolo getting very salty as well, and I thought, well, that's about Ross Brawn. It's like, I think you're sort of forgetting how much success and victory that
how much he did
brought
for you.
Your team, and I don't think you'd be where you are as an entity if it wasn't for Ross Brawn. So pipe down, or whatever the Italian for pipe down is.
Was it 5 Constructors' Championships, one after the other, I think? So.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Well, it was 98 and 9 were McLaren. I think, did Ferrari win it in 99? Maybe they won the Constructors' Championship. I can't remember.
I can't remember.
But certainly 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. So, at least 5, if not one extra on the bounce somewhere.
They had a pretty good run of it, all due to Ross. Interesting that he should then turn from poacher to gamekeeper when the FIA appointed him head of the technical commission. I'm not sure whether he's now withdrawn from that.
I think he's retired and gone fishing now, but of course the FIA sort of a few years ago had the very sensible idea of, well, if you need something doing, just give it to Ross and leave him alone and tell him to get on with it, and he'll get on with it, and generally speaking, it will be done, rather than the current show that is the FIA strategy of sack everyone, piss everyone off, moan at people for swearing, sack the race directors. I mean, talking of F1 and sliding into smoothly into F1 news in advance of the Las Vegas Grand Prix this weekend, or the Spider Pig Grand Prix as it's known, due to the track looking a bit like an upside down pig, is Niels Wittich has according to the FIA, resigned, and off he's gone, or mutual consent or something like that. Niels Wittich has come out and said, I definitely did not quit. So he's been moved on. Whether that's quite in the wake of Brazil, I can't imagine it is, really. I mean, there wasn't a lot that the race director could have done wrong or did do wrong, or I don't know. Was it something to do with the red flags and the time over the red flags? But I'm not sure.
No, I can't see that. I can't see that a lot of those decisions that were taken, rightly or wrongly, could be attributed to the race director. You know, if you're going to have a number of arbiters of good racing practice, and you've gone from one in recent years to several, it seems as though the standard of those judgments is going down the pan a bit, and they make very rapid judgments, which I think sometimes they regret, and they make judgments that are affecting the championship.
But that's the stewards, of course. That's not the race directors. We've got two separate things here. So something's gone on in the background, but it's has he just p***ed off Mohammed Ben Sulayem, or sworn at him, or I don't know, worn a necklace or a bit of jewellery or the wrong underpants, or I don't know.
Who knows?
Gates, what do you think?
Well, do you know, I've been thinking about this, and wow, that's a complete lie. Well, what I have been thinking about is just the sheer amount of money that's tied up in F1, and the motivator for that, and the cost of teams and the facilities and everything else. And I was thinking about the Tyrrell shed, and
yes,
I was watching something yesterday, and they were talking about engine placement, where it is in the car, and how that sort of goes back to F1 and John Cooper and everything else. And cars then were obviously at the sort of the top of the technological game. But at what point did we move from having F1 cars, which were cars that were perhaps more accessible in terms of a team that could work out of a shed, to having to have a huge technical centre, having to have a huge supporting circus that goes with it, having to have this level of intense scrutiny? What changed?
That was realistically because I was in that shed in period, and there was no way you could really operate that team out of a shed. It was a joke. It couldn't really be done, but they did it. And that was the way it was, I guess, through the 50s, 60s, and very, very early 70s, perhaps. But it was not a realistic way of carrying on. And very soon, even on that site, there were a multiplicity of sheds. So, yes, the one that's been salvaged, and well done for the Duke and all of those, a good word at salvaging that shed, because it is historically very important. I cannot see how they ever managed really to run that team out of there. And that was the way it was then.
I don't know, but I think it's probably fair to say it was commercialisation that moved Formula One from a weekend hobby, something you did for the fun of it. As soon as there were sponsors, prize money involved, that then means, well, if you're going to invest some money, then you'll spend a bit more money, and actually you'll spend £1 more than the guy next to you to get a few more horsepower, to get a bit more grip, to make the car that little bit lighter, and on you go. I think it's probably just a natural human or sporting evolution, isn't it? I mean, it's no different to football or rugby or cricket or even the most sort of pure human sports, martial arts, boxing. I think it's fair to say that a boxer from 2024 would run rings, to use the phrase, round a boxer from the 1940s, and cricketers, and again, cricket, ball, willow, stumps. Again, that game hasn't really changed, has it? Football is, as an essence of a game, hasn't changed, but human performance and technique and the analysis and the information that goes into it, I think that's what drives everything on, isn't it? In the old days it was you'd nail a car together and say, well, what does it feel like? And somebody like Nicky Lauda would be invaluable because he could tell you the car was a shit box and then tell you how to improve it. Whereas nowadays it's more, well, the computer says you went 4 clicks slower with this setup than with the other setup, but so it doesn't matter that you prefer the slower setup, you go with the quicker one even though it feels worse.
I mean, set aside the fact that suddenly F1 had vast amounts of tobacco money, booze money, Johnny Walker, and, the name of household brands are just endless.
Other brands of alcohol are available.
Yeah, there's a sort of thought process of, would the drivers from that era stack up in cars on par with current F1 drivers? It's an interesting game to speculate, and I suspect that the very best in any era could be the very best in any era. I had a conversation with somebody today and said, there's 8 billion of us on the planet and 24 people on the grid. It's a very, very, very small percentage of people that get right to the very top.
20.
22, whatever.
Well, there's 19 and Lance Stroll, so hey, you're only one Euro Millions win away from being on the grid as well.
Oh, it's not for me, I don't think, anymore. But nevertheless, I mean, I think it's an interesting. Would Dr. Giuseppe Farina stack up against Lewis, Fernando Alonso, or Fangio? How good was Fangio? Was Keke Rosberg as good as his son? It's just interesting to speculate. Who would be the best of those? If you set them all in the same car, on the same track, on the same day?
I think we can answer that categorically by saying Jim Clark.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say it, and I entirely agree that the most versatile driver in history, fast in pretty much anything that he'd ever driven, wasn't he? He was just...
That's true enough.
That's it.
I would go with Jim Clark as a very strong contender. Fangio, certainly, because of his determination to win. But actually, interestingly, Fernando Alonso is getting now towards the age at which Fangio started racing.
Well, there we are. There's hope for me yet, being as I am younger than Fernando Alonso. And of course, I think, although Gates, you actually hold an advantage as well because you're shorter than him, so you've got a better centre of gravity, haven't you? Being slightly under 5'7".
Ever so slightly taller than Fernando Alonso. There's a quiff in it, I should think. No, there's not a lot. If I wore my high heels, then I'd definitely be taller. Anyway, I want to change the subject, if I may, because there's something that's been bothering me.
Is this going back to the conversation about medical checkups we had at the beginning of the podcast?
No, that's been troubling me. There's a different thing there altogether.
Oh, okay.
This has been bothering me. This is Jaguar. Now, if I was a dealer, and by dealer I mean car dealer as opposed to, other things.
A pharmacist.
Yes, a pharmacist. Exactly that. My ice cream van of blaring music. If I was a car dealer and I'd spent quite a lot of money rejuvenating my Jaguar Land Rover dealership, I would be very upset about the fact that they've stopped building cars.
Yeah, because the dealer standards for JLR is not. They're not cheap, are they? It's not pop down B&Q, get some cladding which you can get on the 3 for 2, or there's a Black Friday sale, and just nail it to the side of your building yourself. They cost quite a lot of money to build a JLR dealership. I forget which one it was. There was a YouTube video on a tour around a JLR dealership, wasn't it? The thing was 45 minutes long. It was ridiculous, and it was just them walking around, and you probably only saw about a third of it, if that. It's the sort of place where if you went around and said good morning to everyone on your way into work, by the time you'd finished, it would be time to go home. It was nuts. So they don't sell any cars. It's like, am I missing the point here? They're a car company, and they've just gone, nah, do that next year. It's like they've just said, probably need a couple of months to flatten the curve, don't we? They've just put themselves into lockdown. It doesn't make any sense.
Is this some elaborate way of playing the numbers? Because things are going to be difficult for some manufacturers to meet the 2030 targets. And apparently there is a meeting between the SMMT and members of the government tomorrow to suggest that perhaps some of those targets should be taken back to 2035, which, as you know, is something I've just mentioned before that I thought was sort of inevitability about it. But it's a way of, I think, easing some of the burdens, the sales burdens that are going to be falling on some of these the car makers.
Thing is, just to jump in there, it's not the car makers that this lands on. This ends up landing on the dealers in the form of either supply or targets, one of the two, which is why we've seen such a glut of and such a car crash, or part of the reason we've seen such a car crash of EV residuals is the absolute flood of demonstrators onto the market and self-registrations and fleet deals and whatever it is to try and get over the line. But if you only have to drive past a BCA or a Mannheim or any other vehicle auction car park to see the sheer number of EVs lining up, whether they're Kias, whether they're Polestars, whether they're Teslas, whatever. There's millions of the bloody things out there. But the pressure at the end of this year, I think, was it Suzuki turned around the other day, so I heard a little snippet on the grapevine and gave just completely and utterly, just almost stopped supplying cars, didn't they? They haven't quite done a Jaguar in terms of we don't sell anything at all, but it was they had to severely cut back. And I think Renault said something similar about the number of ICE vehicles. But are we not just sort of, we're going to end up with this arbitrary once round the sun point in time of the 31st of December this year as being when we get to a certain figure, and then next year it all starts again. But if you go nuts self-registering everything to get over the line, how on earth do you carry on with it next year? It's not going to happen.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. It's certainly not sustainable. But I do wonder if they're trying to be a bit cute by saying, well, okay, if we have to sell a certain proportion of EV vehicles within our overall total, well, if we nobble our overall total by stopping selling the cars, does that change the ratio in our favour? Is that the game they're playing?
It's definitely what a lot of manufacturers are doing. A lot of manufacturers are constraining supply of ICE vehicles, only supplying vehicles which are hybrid to gain some credits, and otherwise only supplying EV vehicles in good numbers. So they're delaying supply. And that's happening for a lot of manufacturers that are selling more than 5,000 cars a year. However, in Jaguar's case, no. They've decided that what they want to do is completely reinvent the brand as an EV-only brand, and that's going to be with cars from 2026. Now, everyone's been saying, well, when are we going to see a car? Hang
on. They had an electric car, didn't they?
They did.
Why didn't they just keep selling that, and then they would have achieved their objective of becoming an EV-only brand?
I understand they had a lot of problems with the iPlayer. I was hearing a complaint on one of the consumer programs only today, which is why it was withdrawn, because those problems were not economically fixable. There were braking issues.
Well, I don't know, because the iPlayer has been around since about 2018.
Yeah,
so
I like the iPlayer.
Years.
Yeah.
It still confuses me that it's not the E-Pace that's the electric one, it's the iPlayer that's the electric. I have identified this electric car that we're going to make, so I don't know what kind of accent you have to talk in to make it an electric car, but some kind of weird sort of Aussie Cockney
living in Australia.
I think if you're a Dick Van Dyke but from Birmingham in Mary Poppins, it's all electric cars, isn't it? But anyway, leaving nomenclature aside, surely if you want to become an EV-only brand, just stop selling all of the cars that aren't EV, and then job done.
Well, they're going to move themselves up market. That's the plan. So the thought is that their cars are going to be £100,000 plus. The first car is going to be...
They're a bit expensive already, aren't they, Jags? They're not cheap,
No, this is the problem. I will come back to this. To this. So they're talking 4-door, long coupe, think XJE, but that was shelved, I think, in 2021. More than, I think it's 575 horsepower, 430-mile range. So like a GT
I'm interested.
car. Yeah, but over £100,000. The question is, are the people with money going to be paying over £100,000 for an EV? Is this going to be a particularly popular car? Because there's a lot hinged on this if Jaguar is going to reinvent themselves. And I think they needed to.
So I'm just trying to work this out, bearing in mind we were thinking that a used Taycan makes for a very good buy at 40. So basically you can have a used Taycan for the price of a new Cougar plug-in hybrid, can't you? So
yes.
Just go for the Taycan. So actually, by the time it comes to throw the Taycan away, then yeah, I'm liking the sound of this Jaguar, whatever it is. That'll have depreciated to about 10 grand by then, wouldn't it? So yes, I'm interested. I'm on board.
And this is a problem, isn't it? Because there's a few things that have afflicted Jaguar. Firstly is the fact that people don't necessarily see them as reliable. I'm being very careful how I choose my words here. And the same with Land Rover.
I mean, Jag, if you are listening and you would like to invite us to the launch of any vehicle over the next however many years, then we will come along and quite happily delete this podcast and be absolutely fine with it. So,
look, I will freely admit that I'm a bit of a Jag fan, but they produced some fantastic cars. They had a bit of an old image. Then they tried to modernise the cars a bit by producing cars that looked like the old ones, or sort of back to the old days. So you think about the S-Type, for example, which is a pretty reasonable car, but looks
lovely
old.
car.
Yeah,
that's one of the best drives I ever had was an S-Type R. Absolutely brilliant.
But again, there's something a bit old money, isn't there, about the way that they were?
Oh, it's very old-fashioned.
Then they decided they needed to bring it a bit up to date, and they released the XF, which is excellent, really good to drive. Beautifully designed, Ian Callum designs, aren't they? These the XF, I think the XF Sport Brake, Shooting Brake, whatever they decided to call it, but the estate version, which is also a very good looking car. The XE, which is also a very very good looking car, and then a smattering of SUVs with the E-Pace, F-Pace, and everything else. But the problem is when they've done this, you still had the XJ at the top, which was again a really good car. I think subjectively, the back end maybe a bit Marmite, but a great car to drive. And I've been lucky enough to have had an XF and XJ for a period of time. I didn't own it, but I've had the opportunity to drive them for some time. And I really do like them. I think they are excellent cars to drive. But they produced these sort of 3 and 5 series alternatives, rivals, or what have you. And people just didn't really buy them. But by producing them, they sort of bring the overall value perception of the brand down in my mind. Jaguar have always been a really good value proposition, so an E-Type has always been, relatively speaking, a bit of a bargain compared to the competition. And same if you think about an F-Type or an XK or whatever.
The E-Type remains one of the most highly desirable used cars, doesn't it?
It does, cars. And it's now worth a lot of money, but in period, it was a good buy compared to something else for the same performance, yeah?
Oh yeah, only because they lost money on every one.
But nevertheless, by producing loads of these more basic, cheaper cars, I think it's something, it detracts a bit from the premium image. I think it's the same thing with BMW, with things like the 1 Series, which is not a bad car. And then also with things like Mercedes and the A-Class. People want to get into it. It's aspirational. There's a lot of cars. But when I see an expensive Merc going down the road, I don't instantly think, oh, that's a top-end luxury motor, because I see so many C-classes and A-classes and everything else, so I don't tend to notice it so much. So it'd be interesting to see whether they can achieve that next level, whether they can punch their way up into that next level of premium. I'm not sure.
I have some reservations. I think they've very successfully, as you say, pushed the brand down market, going for volume. When the cars they developed an unfortunate reputation for a lack of reliability. Like, it was quite common to see them on various hard shoulders. When we had hard shoulders, they were populated by quite a lot of Jaguars at one stage.
Ah, there we go. Were smart motorways the work of JLR then? So we're getting a lot of flack. This is the governmental way of cutting down on crime by decriminalising everything. Well, what's the problem? Well, all our cars are broken down on hard shoulders, right? Get rid of the hard shoulders. There we are. You never see one broken down on the hard shoulder, do you? Problem solved.
Indeed. Well, I'm quite convinced that the reason that nobody ever bothers to fix the bloody potholes is because it gets all the old cars off the road, just smashes them to pieces.
All this said, I can't help but find myself wanting a Jag of some description. I
think as long as it's old, because let's face it, you're not going to want a new Jag or a reinvented Jag, are you? Because it's just going to be a nightmare of touchscreens and bonging at you. I got out of the car today. I got in a car, started it, moved it, drove it around for 10 seconds, got out of it, and it must have bonged at me 60 times in the space of 2 minutes. It was bonging at me when it was off. I'd got out of it, I'd locked the car, I could still hear it bonging. I don't know what it was bonging at, because all the screens were off. And it's of course, it's not like it has a little separate buzzer that you can just unplug so the bongs don't happen. You know, it's not a door open, lights on warning buzzer bong, is it? It's all through the speakers and everything else. So you're not going to be able to turn the bongs off. You're not going to be able to adjust the aircon or the heated seats without pressing a myriad of touchscreen buttons. You're not going to be able to turn any of the stability control off, are you? So it's just going to be so go and buy something old.
Well, if you do want to buy something old, you can actually buy an XFR. Now, the XF is one that I think is it's a lovely car. I always felt kind of special driving one. And you can buy a nice example of an XFR, a facelift one, for sub 17. In fact, you can buy them for about 15 and 16,000, which is pretty good. And you can buy the earlier ones for 10 and up, which I think is just...
That's a lot of liability for only 10 grand, isn't it?
It is. Or if you fancy...
That's a very cheap way of buying financial ruin.
An XFRS, of course, 5-litre supercharged like the SFR. And 500 and something horsepower? 20 grand? That's a lot of car for the money, isn't it?
It's a lot of bang for your buck, isn't it?
It is.
Well, maybe quite literally, for a lot of bucks.
If you could buy one with a warranty, though, would you?
It depends how many miles you have to do a year. As long as it's less than 4, then yes.
I have some terrible thoughts in my head. The idea of this is attractive to me because it makes absolutely no sense. And it's got a supercharger, and I'm a big fan of a supercharger, as you already know.
Wasn't your supercharger at the head of the programme was in question? Oh no, it was your turbocharger, your shaft was
turbo shaft
playing up.
Yes, exactly that.
Of all the nicknames to give it.
I was thinking the other day, it must be possible to think of a few car components that could be a fantastic insult. Like, I don't know, calling someone an absolute half shaft or something like that. There must be a few.
Dog leg.
Exactly. That kind of thing entirely. Yeah. You absolute bell housing.
Oh, that's in common usage. I've heard that.
Yeah, bell housing's a fairly good one, isn't it?
I think there's a future book there. Motoring insults through the ages. Yeah, I can see that selling.
You parcel shelf.
Oh, that's bland. That's very bland. I like that one.
Yeah, so that's quite gentle. That's a family-friendly insult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It is, you absolute bootstrap. And on that note, we've descended into insulting each other, so it's probably time that we end. It's been fantastic talking to you again. Thank you for listening, and of course, don't forget to check us out. We are at UKMotorTalk everywhere. Make sure that you like, subscribe, tick things, leave us a nice comment or review. And if you want to write to us, well, good luck. And on that note, I've been Mike. Goodbye.
I've been Jim. Goodbye.
I've been Graham. Look after yourself, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye now.
UKMotorTalk, a First Take Media production.